Oh, hello, Studio 108 community. Thank you so much for clicking in. We love it when you follow along. And this conversation, you're really going to want to pay some attention to because it is about something you're already doing and something that's required that you do. Like there's no alternative. You've got to do it. So let's optimize. Let's optimize. I'm here with Tom Jasinski. He is a somatic breath coach, among other kinds of modalities, and he's going to unpack that for us. He practices Kundalini Yoga here at Studio 108, and he is down at the Light, Wisdom and Wellness in Brecksville with a little front desk assistance, and most importantly and relevant for today, somatic breath practices. And he's doing somatic breath practices in that high frequency scalar wave biophoton environment, and people are having incredible experiences. So we're going to chat about it. Hi, Tom.
Hey, I was telling you earlier when I walked in, like I've just been buzzing with energy for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because this is so near and dear in my heart. It is like the thing I love talking about the most. And we have limited time, so I want to like touch on like the most important things. But like I hope this conversation doesn't end here, and I hope that we continue this conversation too. When you guys come practice, when you even do Kundalini classes, and this is why I love Kundalini, because it just integrates some of the best things, the breath work, the nervous system, the body, just like integrating all of those components. And it's this like ancient technology that we're working with. But like,
Yeah, and I mean, you have to see if you're listening on Apple or Spotify how lit up Tom is. Like when you see someone who's right on path, right on purpose, is excited about something that really does mean something, and you're like, oh man, that must feel so good to be in alignment with yourself that way. That's what I'm seeing from Tom, and I think that's why. Well, I know that that's why people are attracted to work with you, and I do believe that within that situation, that's when we're the most effective at what we do. So yeah.
When I start off some of my somatic sessions with clients, and especially with groups, I always quote the philosopher Howard Thurman. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do that." Because what the world needs are people that have fully come alive.
100%.
And I live by that,
Yeah.
and I feel animated, the second I start doing this, so
Yeah, and I think you and I are blessed. And we were just talking about this, like how to get to that point. Like the practices will take you to that point. And so we're blessed that we've had the practices for long enough that it's taking us to that point. But it's really, really important to Tom and I, like we've discussed it so many times here and at the other business, but like how to inspire people who feel like that's so far away yet. So let's share some information. Wait, let's do a little backstory. So you're new to the Northeast Ohio area the past few years.
sure.
So I want to welcome you. Welcome to town. But you've had winter before, so it's not like, you'll be fine here. You'll be fine. I'm not worried about you, Tom.
I'm not concerned in the slightest.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. So I could say it started in my mother's room, truly, because well, I don't share this off with a lot of people, but when she was pregnant, she and her twin sister actually were pregnant at the same time, and they were both sick with rubella. And at that time, they didn't really have great ways of treating that with pregnant women. And so every single doctor she went to was kind of pushing an abortion.
Wow.
And so she kind of really just sort of stuck it out, held her own, deeply, faithful, and just kind of
100%. Yeah.
praying for the best possible outcome. And so when she gave birth, and mind you, then I bring this up because this is really important for people to understand, like in terms of nervous system development, that's starting from the moment that, like, from the moment of conception, like already a few weeks into fetal development, that nervous system is already building and it's already taking information. And so if mom's stressed, if mom is living in a state of fear, that's already informing that child developing fetus. And so we wonder why so many kids these days in each successive generation seems to just be having so many more chronic health issues so much early on. all these brain developmental issues, cognitive
And I mean, the research on trauma is 8 generations.
14 plus. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I
Yeah.
imagine it just goes and extends as far back as it can, but we can only study so much, so for so
100%.
many
Yeah,
generations.
100%.
And yeah, Mark Wolin wrote a great book on this. For those who want to explore that, it's titled "It Didn't Start with You," and it really tracks trauma cross generationally.
And these are research-based books now.
Yeah.
So I think like back in the 80s, like some of this was like a little woo-woo assumptions, hypothesis, and now we have like solid research-based,
Solid research.
yeah,
And this is
that you can tap into, and that's a great book.
it is, and this is going to tie directly into what we're going to talk about with somatic practices and why they're important. Because there's our personal history, but then there's also what we inherited, what we're not conscious of. So even if we go to therapy and talk about things and have context and tools to work with, if there's unconscious material still lodged inside the system that we have no way of accessing.
It's kind of like your hardcore hard operating system.
Yeah.
Like, what's that called? The hard drive, right? It's not as malleable. It's more like it's in the background of how everything is going to work. And it's like the goldfish that doesn't realize it's swimming in water. Like that imprint on our subconscious from which we live, it's nearly impossible to like even see it and witness it for ourselves. Yeah. Really.
So that's what I came into the world with. So when I was born, my mother, she told me, basically when they do those health mock-ups at the beginning, they do health assessments. I scored the lowest you could score on it, on all of that.
Oh, little baby Tom, I'm so sorry.
Was not doing so well. And in fact, half the body was also paralyzed at that time.
Really?
Yeah. And so they actually were fortunate enough to find this one doctor who was implementing this kind of new experimental like way of trying to like innervate nerves, but just like holding and applying like pain points, to like really
neural development training.
And so of course, you knew as a newborn are coming into this world and you have all these people surrounding you and just inflicting pain onto this little body.
Wow.
To help you, to serve
of
you.
Course,
but how is your body to know?
wiring. Yeah.
And like thank God, like they were able to get everything working.
Wow.
The only thing
I want to ask about your cousin.
Same situation.
Okay.
Same situation and also pulled through.
Good.
The only thing that he and I both came out of that with is me, I have no hearing in my right side. He's deaf on both sides. And so he wears hearing. Yeah. But that was really the only sort of downstream effect of that. And they were expecting us coming out with no limbs, missing limbs, blind, mute, dumb, all of that. So we got lucky.
No, absolutely. You're blessed, and there's an intention and a purpose behind that. And how beautiful for your mother to hold that prayer and that for your soul to come through. That's really beautiful. I'm like thinking how infrequently to never I've heard about rubella during pregnancy in that time span. Yeah.
They developed a lot of ways to address it now. So like this is a lot of preemptive things that are done these days. Whereas like, and mind you, I'm Polish. This was back in Poland back in the early 90s, so things were just
in Poland.
Oh, it's
Got you. Okay. Yeah.
And actually this kind of ties into the second piece because my parents ended up leaving me with my grandmother when I was about 2 so they could come to the US.
Wow.
And so now you have this 2-year-old that wakes up on
separation. Yeah.
I've had the worst separation and the worst abandonment, fear of abandonment issues my whole life. And that really was what drove a lot of my, downstream dysfunctions, because it developed into perfectionism. I needed to prove myself to the world, like, don't leave me. Like, I'm worthy of being loved. Like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove it to you.
Yeah.
So I was a perfectionist in school, your classic, straight A student. I was prolific athlete, doing all these different sports, in the gym all the time.
And by that point, you were in the States, yeah? Did you go to
By
school
that
in the
time, I
States?
was in the States. Yeah, I came here when I was about 3 years old.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so I was just always pushing and burning the candle at all ends all the time, my entire life, and always operating from this deep, deep lack of worth. lack of self-love, lack of self-compassion, and it didn't really manifest strongly for me until I was in my like late teens, early 20s, where because of that behavior, I think we just lost it actually.
I think we have it. I think we're still good. It's fine. That's back to the meeting. Okay, we're back.
We lost you for a second.
We lost our visual for a second, so you got to see my face like up close and personal, taking the screen. I think what we have is really an important start. So we're gonna let that be, if you're good with that.
Yeah.
All right. So your story.
My story, yeah. And so my early 20s, right? Here I am now in college, like truly burning the candle on that because I'm still trying to maintain my straight A's. I am at the same time working full time to get myself through school, doing all the things, doing all the things in a relationship at that time, trying to show up as the best partner I could, and still trying to navigate all of these fears and things that were operating inside. And in college, this is also important to the story because I was originally planning on being a professor and I was majoring in religious studies, classical studies, philosophy. And so those things really informed my worldview and vastly informed my perception of reality, my place in it. I was raised Catholic, and this really started to open my mind in a new way. And I mean, imagine having like tribal medicine and coming to class and like teaching and going through things, and like it was just so mind-opening, so heart-opening, and it really put me on a different path after that because it really informed my worldview, and truly what life is, what God
you took it personally. Like you studied and you took it personally, and I think that's a really valuable shift in how young people can operate. Like in my generation just didn't take anything personally, just studied it, got an A on the test, and that's it. And like for you to kind of know that this is something I want to interact and relate to.
This was something my soul guided me to.
Right.
It was like a self-initiation. Like it knew that it needed to like learn these things and embody them. Yeah. And allow them to transform me.
Right.
But then also at that exact same time, everything broke apart. The relationship ended, my body broke down from just burnout. And in the worst way. I mean, I'm a 6-foot male. My muscles started to catabolize. I was weighing like 118 pounds at my worst. And insane, just chronic fatigue. Took me like 2-3 hours sometimes in the morning to get out of bed. My endocrine system was way off. I mean, night sweats that like literally just like my sheets, I had to do laundry every single day, couldn't operate otherwise. And at that point in time, I was really just in a dark place. I did not want to live. I really could not keep going. There was no energy, no motivation. I was depressed, I was anxious, I was working through so much, and realizing too at that point developed like an eating disorder, body dysmorphia. And so there was just a lot that was moving through me and a lot that needed to be unpacked. And this is what really just drove me in. I'm like, there's a reason for this. Like, there's a reason my body created this condition. Like, what? It's a whole experience coming through you. Yeah. And I had to now start to address some of those wounds. I had to start addressing some of those shadow components that were driving the behaviors that were then creating the dysfunction. So you want to really like taking a look at that hard drive operating system, like what's the background to all this that's leading me astray, really, like keeping me out of alignment, leading me away from just the best of who you are. Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. And then, so this is partly what also then informed my education moving forward. I graduated school realizing I didn't want to have anything to do with academia, actually. I didn't have that teacher archetype. Yeah, of course you do. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, like, let me learn everything I can about the mind, the body, the spirit. And so I studied at a bunch of different institutes. I studied nutrition, exercise science, postural correction, a lot of body manipulation, uh, worked with like the Czech Institute. And then fast forward, I met my business partner who is an MD and acupuncturist, and he wanted to start up the neurofeedback business. So I'm like, let me
This
do
was
it.
in New York.
This was in New York.
Yeah.
And so I dove into neuroscience.
Uh-huh.
And so that really further just kept
Yeah.
expanding my understanding of it all, and started learning about brain health through the Inman University, and just like everything I could do to like really see how it's all connecting, how it's all.
This is like also a great example of the newer paradigm of how we learn. Like rather than an academia program that gives you letters after your name and a degree, and then you get this job that you work for 30 years, like this new idea that there's a plethora, like there's a buffet table of interesting material available to me, and I get to customize my personal palette for what you can offer and what you can do and what you integrate and bring meaning to within all of those different genres of understanding and study. So those were like all different kinds of like coaching programs and like certification area kind of things that went on top of your degree.
I can't tell you how many I
just like,
continue to take. Like I'm never literally not in the middle of some kind of training right now.
Always.
So
Educational budget line.
and I spent tens of thousands,
Yeah.
post degree,
Just
just like on continuing to learn more.
Yeah. And when you are, like you said, sort of taking it personally, embodying it, integrating it into how you work and who you are and how you even practice for your own benefit, it's extremely rich. Like really, really
And
rich.
it shows. And then it shows. And this is, I think, one of the things that I want to impart, this conversation is how in this personal practice, when we take such full responsibility for ourselves and really commit to a practice, we show up so differently in life.
100%.
In our relationships, in our business partnerships, in every.
Yeah.
And people feel that. You walk into a room and you want to be that presence for someone else to feel safe.
100%.
To be grounding. But you have to feel safe and grounded, centered internally first to be able to impart that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of teachers, and it's almost like you could say that there's a new role, ROLE, or a new position in life where the expert doesn't practice.
Yeah.
And like that, now you can feel how that's a different category. And I know my teachers in Kundalini Yoga are like, you can say you're a Kundalini Yoga teacher, go ahead, but unless you're practicing, you're not. You're just not. Like that's an old school thing where you could just get your certifications and never really do it for yourself. And I mean, we have all kinds of medical care people who don't pay attention to their own health. We have all kinds of like teachers who don't continue their own education under their field of study. And I think it's just night and day difference. Yeah.
It really comes from the very interesting place that I've learned. People who want to take care of other people are also really trying to escape themselves, and they're running away from themselves.
Exactly.
And it's a very healthy and positive way to continue to distract, to continue to run away, because the most scary thing to do is really go inward and face ourselves. Yeah. Right. And I've worked with those people. Beautiful healthcare practitioners who just had so much of their own pain that they're still holding on to, so much of their own trauma. And it was showing up in their decision making and their relationship with me, and all of those different things. The way they even ran their business, or sometimes even interacted with their clients. And so that is the most important piece, actually. Yeah.
You can only take anyone as far as you've traveled.
Absolutely.
So the rest is a scam. It's just not. Yeah.
And it's inauthentic and not genuine.
Well, I feel a little dangerous. It makes me anxious to think about it. It's like it's very dangerous, it is. And at the same time, no one knows everything and no one's an expert at all of it. And so one of the things that I really feel when I would do the advanced trainings is like this incredible excitement over all I had to share, and like wanting to gather all of that up and share it, but also this desire to like sit back with my arms open, because at that level, everyone is bringing so much as well. So it's like I can make my offering and then everybody contributes to like the creation of what happens with that. But
You're pointing to something really important. And it doesn't matter if it's a yogic practice or, just wherever you can find community, because we all carry a different piece to this whole collective puzzle, and we all carry different pieces to one another's puzzles too, and we're all walking each other home.
Yeah.
And so, they did that Blue Zone studies where they were looking at like the longest lived populations,
Every single one of them.
the regions with the greatest amount of centenarians, and people not living just to past 100, but like thriving.
Yeah.
And
every single one of them community.
And they looked at all the common factors and denominators, but the one that literally outperformed all the others combined was a felt sense of community. I belong, and also this community has me. So we feel safe, but we also have purpose, and we don't have to have it all. We just get to like truly work on ourselves and know that we can depend upon this collective that we're a part of also. That is so important.
It is so important. Yeah. I love that story. I can that tracks for you. That story. Congratulations. You worked really hard.
We're still working on it.
Of course, but
we're still working on it.
That's great. I think the 20s are really hard.
But the 20s are really where you start to learn about yourself.
It's
where you're finally like in that place where you're like in this self-discovery, because
and discovery, whereas there's a societal expectation that you know yourself in your 20s. You're discovering yourself. So you can't know yourself. You have to just explore and discover around that.
And you started this conversation mentioning like seeing someone and seeing how they're in perfect alignment with their path. We wear so many masks over the course of our lifetime. From the moment we're born, really, it's like, well, what does mom and dad expect?
We look for it. Am I okay? Am I okay?
Right. It's all survival. I have to belong. So let me like make sure that I'm acting a certain way. Even if it feels inauthentic to me, I'm going to act a certain way to make mom and dad happy. I'm going to make sure I'm accepted with my peers.
It's that root chakra, is that belongingness, is survival. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate?
Yeah.
I love the man. And he said that the greatest trauma that we experience is a disconnection from self. And we disconnect from ourselves so early on. And so then we have to rediscover that person, and, part of, and kind of tying back to like the somatic work and the somatic breath work, you're just releasing layers of everything you're not. And that's why you say the breath is the bridge, because it connects you back into who you are, into yourself, and into your own knowing, and we allow intuition to guide us.
100%. And a lot of that, like a lot of what we're holding is in the back of the closet anyway. So it's not going to leave unless it's time to leave. So if you're not ready to release it, it won't come up. You'll be fine. But yeah, let's see what he wants really quick. Hi, I'm sorry. We're recording we're recording a podcast. Bye-bye.
Minor interruption. We're back.
That's 2. Well, 3 if you count the dinging as well.
Well, I like doing things in 3 6 and I know we both do. So
lucky number. Lucky number. Yeah, let's take this opportunity then to shift more to the somatic breath work, because I feel like of all the tools for really releasing things without necessarily consciously having to tag them all. Like when you clean out the refrigerator, you don't necessarily tag all of the things you're throwing in the garbage. You don't sit and talk about the whole story of what happened, which is just such a cognitive task, a meaningless cognitive task, right? It's like the somatic breath work is super powerful. And can you just unpack that for us? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to like touch on the somatic breath work and then just breathing in general. It's something like we're born doing. It's not something we're taught to do correctly. And that's so interesting. And we have such dysfunctional breathing patterns now in our society, and that's mediated primarily through like our environment, our internal state, our emotional state, all of those things. posture is so important, right?
Right.
Um,
The book club just did the James Nestor book, and there's a picture in there of the poor posture, and I was like, oh my gosh, my whole family.
I know. And it starts so early on. And like, so if there's parents listening to this, for example, like if you notice your child breathing with their mouth open, encourage them to close it. So many of us are chronic mouth breathers, and this is somewhat a two-part problem because part of it is like I'm stressed, and so I'm breathing very shallow, I'm breathing in my upper chest, just like this hyperventilated state that we're living in perpetually, chronically, but we're off-gassing so much carbon dioxide when we're doing this. And carbon dioxide is a natural muscle relaxant. It's a vasodilator. If we off-gas too much, we're in a state of hypocapnia, low CO2. That causes asynchronous firing in your neurons. So you may experience anxiety, depression, panic disorders, epileptic seizure activity, schizophrenia.
Breathing.
Overbreathing. Breathing too much, breathing with our mouths open, breathing off too much CO2.
I think one of the this idea of the nitric acid was like new for me.
The nitric oxide?
Nitric oxide, there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah. Like the importance of that was new to me.
Absolutely. So when we breathe with our noses, we warm the air, we humidify it, we filter it, but we also produce nitric oxide when we breathe nasally. And why is nitric oxide important? Other than just being a vasodilator, right? Better blood flow and all those things. It's also a potent antiviral molecule, you know? So talk about like wanting to boost your immune functions and be more resilient. Nasal breathing is what's going to get you there.
Yeah.
And when we hum, guess what? We can chant, we can do a lot of different things. We just hum it out. We increase that nitric oxide production by 1,500%.
Wow, that's a lot. 1,500% is a lot. Not only that, but you're vibrating like a gentle vibration through all of the vagal nerve.
Yeah.
So there's an additional reminder to drop the nervous system, calm, reduce anxiety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of the vagus, right? We have it splits into two. We have the ventral in the front, dorsal in the back. Then we have the sympathetic chain. And so the dorsal is actually what developed first, so 500 million years ago, before the sympathetic, and then the ventral, which is socially engaged, feeling calm, safe, relaxed, was maybe closer to 200 years ago. And so dorsal is really our freeze response, right? So it shuts us down. Again, speaking to the parents out there, your child is crying and then you think you're going to allow it to self-soothe and then it stops crying. It's actually in trauma state. It's a freeze response. It's like, this is so overwhelming. I'm crying. There's no help coming. Something's wrong. Your body shuts down. And this is important too, because the shutdown response is universal and we experience it throughout our lives. Let's say I have a really strong emotional response to something as a 5-year-old. And I'm just not resourced enough to deal with it. My psyche knows better. It's going to say, we're going to lock this away for a little bit until you're resourced enough to meet it. You mentioned earlier, like if you're not ready to meet something, it won't come up. You're absolutely right. But when we have a practice and we build resilience, we build flexibility.
And we can kind of chip away at things really gently, really easy.
Absolutely. And so we want to be in a ventral vagal state. And that's where community comes into play again, because that's when we're feeling connected. And that's when we're feeling neurologically safe as well. And we need to feel neurologically safe.
I think that's so important. We need to feel neurologically safe to heal, and we need to feel neurologically safe, and you can't fake it. You can't fake it. You can try to fake it. You can kind of like muscle through for a while, but you see those people. You just, yeah.
And so the vagus nerve is an important part of the conversation here as well, because it's not just like the somatic practice that you do in that one moment. It's what am I doing every single day? How am I making sure that I'm continually building nervous system flexibility and resilience, down regulating when I need to, and also upregulating sometimes when I need to, because I could be playing a game of soccer and that's a sympathetic response in the sense it's energizing, it's activating, but I'm also connected. It's different than a car barreling down the street and I need to run for my life to get out of the way. It works very differently.
Yeah, the chemical release. Yes, completely different conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or even stress,
Well, and the cortisol bath is so destructive. I mean, like on every level too. So it starts to become like this connected chain to like absolutely every single system, and then every single cell in your body. It's like, yeah.
Your nervous system governs every other system in this body.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so a regulated nervous system also means regulated posture, regular breathing. The vagus nerve innervates the diaphragm, innervates, different gastrointestinal organs and things like that. And so if I'm in a dorsal vagal state, if I'm in a freeze response, that actually constricts your bronchioles. So you can't even like take a deep breath, you know? And so also really important because you mentioned
Tom. Oh,
I know.
I'm like, I know. Oh, it's cringy how much I know.
But then like just to make that note on the your scaling muscles here, your straps, just neuroplastic muscles, these are all innervated by the cranial nerves, not your spinal nerves so much, but the cranial nerves, which includes the vagus nerve, right? And so if you're stressed, this tightens up. If this tightens up and I'm stressed, I'm also breathing too much and I'm breathing off too much CO2. And now my muscles are even more tense because I don't have enough CO2 to relax them. My whole body's tensing up, right? And so it's a feedback loop. It's a catch-22 because now the tension in the system is telling me we're not safe. So let's keep pumping cortisol. Let's keep pumping adrenaline. Let's keep bringing out that glucose from the liver, And so when we start contracting in this way, this also really puts a lot of pressure on your lung capacity and your heart to be able to like fully open up and operate the way it should optimally. And so this is equivalent
physically, but also emotionally.
And emotion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
so like Tom's like pulling his shoulders in, he's like collapsing down, and it's just like, I know if you don't feel very joyful when your body's sort of like energetically crunched in, and then you can't really feel very grateful or I don't know, compassionate and kind. Like it'll affect everything, relationships, job, everything.
And it's worse than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day in terms of the inflammation.
In terms of the
problems that it's actually generating when you have that sort of forward posture, you're all collapsed. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, it's a big deal. There are certain health outcomes that are less in our control and certain that are more in our control. And sometimes we're misguided in how we prioritize that. But simple things like breath and daily movement, like those things can be a higher priority. And the payoff is greater.
So much greater.
Than where we usually put our attention on the things that we want to do in order to, instantly get healthy.
Well, you mentioned emotions, right? And let's say I'm living in a state of fear or stress. All my blood is pulling away from my prefrontal cortex back into the limbic system, and it's staying there. So all my energy, all my resources are being rediverted. So meanwhile, my prefrontal cortex, how am I supposed to engage in like higher executive functioning? How am I supposed to think ahead or control my impulses, inhibit my emotions? How am I supposed to think critically about things?
Yeah, and we're bragging about how stressed we are. Like that's an importance. Like that's the gold medal state of being. But it's actually a scam because you can't even think when you're like that anyway.
Are you optimized for good functioning?
Let's start a new thing where we brag about how chill we are.
Well, you know what? I am a big proponent of like the slow movement.
Yeah.
People really learning how to actually slow down, get still, realize that it's an borrowing this from Sarah Landon, but like stillness is the acceleration point. That's when we actually see the greatest growth.
What do the Navy SEALs say? Fast is slow is fast, something like that. Yeah.
Something like
that. But yeah, we'll have to talk about that more because I can take that personally.
Yeah.
Want to turn it to my therapy session? I could take that personally.
I gotta trigger you today then.
We're gonna put that one on a little list for later.
And so that's why it's so important, working with these different things. And when it comes to somatic breath work, it's a very intentional way of using the breath, because
somatic means what?
Somatic just pertains to the body, right? And so working with any kind of somatic practice can, involve like working with the nervous system, doing a yogic practice. It's a lot of different things, but like we're using the breath very intentionally to dislodge things that are stuck in the system, stuck in the body. And so our emotions can get stuck in the body. Experiences, trauma gets stuck and wired into the body. And if my parents or grandparents also had unresolved issues, unresolved trauma, that is just transferred genetically from one generation to the next. And so now I'm carrying that, and I have no idea that I'm carrying that. Now I'm Polish, and we went through a couple world wars, you know.
Everyone's from somewhere.
Everyone's
Everyone's from somewhere that has gone through,
Exactly.
societal traumas.
99% of the world is touched by something, and 99% of us is carrying something.
Absolutely. And I saw recently something about trauma being carried through the DNA through generations until someone is willing to feel it. It can't be healed until it's felt. And the somatic aspect for me, when I think of things being somatic, I think of they're sensed, they're felt, they're like embodied. Like I know it inside here, not necessarily inside my head, my thinking head. So this idea that we have generations of people now saying, no, it stops with me. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to heal it. This is ancestral, or it's not, or wherever it came from. I'm going to feel it and I'm going to heal it. Right? It's an evolutionary movement that's so incredibly important and critical.
It ripples out.
It ripples out.
It's the second you feel it inside yourself, you generate that change. You ripple that out.
Yeah, and some of this stops with me. The addictions, the phobias, the insecurities, like all of it. The scarcity consciousness that's come from the whole, immigrant conversation in this country.
Oh, so much.
Yeah.
That's one I'm still working through, and
Absolutely.
seeing like the patterns and the belief systems, like just there in the background, and now being more in that observer state where I can just like really bear witness to it and bring compassion to that part of me that still sees those things playing out. Yeah. But to your point, we have to feel it in order to heal it, and where the somatic breath work comes into play. Now in your website, I don't mean to interrupt you, but on the website it said something about like intentionally creating trauma in order to heal it. So when people read that, they might be like, yikes, Tom. But so I want to give you a chance to talk about that, because I think that's really, like, that paints exactly the picture of what happens, but exactly the concern around it. So yeah. 100%. So where I'll make the distinction here as well is there's moments in our lives where we experience trauma. And it's coming out of the blue, it's unexpected, it's overwhelming, it's all those things, right? And so our system responds a certain way, in the best way it can in that moment. And things get locked up inside when we're not able to address them, or we're not able to feel them to completion, or sometimes we're just taught by society, like some things are just not allowed to be felt. Anger, shame, guilt. 100%. There wasn't a way to feel it and deal with it. There just wasn't. Yeah. And so those molecules are not really receiving their full sort of metabolization, and they're just getting locked up inside, which I will also mention that the body expends so many resources keeping things numb, keeping things locked. Those are resources. Keeping things numb. So one of the things I say all the time is that I'm never angry, and that I laugh hard. Because first of all, I retag my anger, and I also numb out to my anger. I just numb it. So I think numb is a really important word in my personal work, and when I work with people, just like numb and forgotten. Things that are just forgotten, they're still there. And as a child, if you were acting out in anger, you were punished. And so as a child, you learn very quickly, this is not a safe emotion to feel or express or act on. Right. So I'm just going to keep suppressing it, but it's got to come out eventually. If it's inside, it's going to come out. Yeah. And life will just keep triggering. Yeah. It'll just keep poking and poking there until it sure does. It sure does. Yeah, it's like a lot of nature. Yeah, for sure. So we're all carrying these things. And so now when we do it in a certain container, it's the difference of, let's say, the car barreling down the street, and I need to get away. And all that cortisol and adrenaline is pumped into my system to help me survive that moment. If I'm doing something intentionally, like getting into an ice bath, and there's intention there, and I'm doing this with awareness, believe it or not, and with support, usually. And with support, absolutely. But even biochemically, that cortisol and adrenaline, all those neurotransmitters are actually acting on different parts of the brain, on different parts of the body. You know what I mean? So your response, even though, again, ice cold bath, like that's a sympathetic activated state, your body is responding internally very differently.
100%.
Become more resilient, it's doing a lot of different things. And so the same way in this practice.
And also when you're intentionally working with that, you're feeling it and coming through a cycle of release, coming through a cycle of recalibration, coming through a cycle of, I want to kind of say rewiring, right?
It's
you're using strategy to regulate and restructure that.
Tying back to the somatic breathwork piece, we are almost in this very intentional state of hyperventilation, I call it. And you are creating a sympathetic response in the system. You're activating the whole thing, you're energizing the whole thing, but you're walking in with intention. You're walking in there, and there's a already built-in context. There's safety, there's facilitation, right? So you're not alone in the process. So your body now knows, okay, like we're gonna create this internal state in order to start churning things up from the bottom up, start dislodging emotions, experience. Things are ready that your body knows, that your deep, the wisdom of your body knows we're resourced enough to touch this. We're resourced enough to allow this to come up for us to feel, to fully feel through to completion and then integration, and so that's why I liken it, and I say it's a simulated trauma response.
Good, yeah.
And in so doing, you're now creating an environment where things are just being brought up to the surface. And I often use the analogy of like shaking a soda bottle, that's all we're really doing. It's just, we're just shaking that soda bottle, and then we're opening it and just allowing whatever's ready to come up.
The offload of that. And I know from my experience, sometimes that can be like a muscle tremor. It can be tears. It can be just a feeling of anger. It can be a feeling of heat or a feeling of cold. So when you get that release, it's not always, I had this specific memory. Like you could have flashback visualizations, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. What you're really offloading is the energetic residue of experiences in the past. And it's fascinating because, you can go in thinking, I don't have anything to release, and just really enjoy the experience and enjoy the ride. But we all have something. It's just unnamed energy. And so inevitably afterwards, you feel light, and you feel clear-headed, you feel
such clarity.
Yeah, just really.
And lightness, like this feeling of lightness, this like weight that was just like
weight off your shoulders.
Just fully stripped.
Yeah. And some of that is the biochemical of it, and what happens in the hormone releases as you go through that process too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when I do it, I usually start by actually downregulating people, really creating a safe container, letting them and their nervous system first know, hey, we're safe.
Yeah.
And we'll do certain movements to actually move some of the emotions that are stored in the hips and the lower back and the ankles and other places in the body that just naturally store a lot of emotion. Psoas major is a huge one.
It sure is.
Yeah. And that's a whole separate conversation that I'm not going to dive into today.
I also feel like inner thighs and upper inner arms, like everything that goes into that protective thing, just kind of like house all of that chronic tension.
So we'll start off with that, and then you'll start breathing. And the thing is, because we're also in this sort of like controlled state of hyperventilation, we are intentionally off-gassing a lot of CO2 in that moment, intentionally so. And so what that does is it creates a state of low oxygen in the body and in the brain. And what it does is it creates a state of transient hypoventility. So your thinking mind, your monkey mind actually shuts off. And you'll hear me 1,000 times say, out of the mind, into the body, out of the mind, into the body. And we're really diving into the body, into the subconscious, but also what they've shown, really two fascinating things with this sort of breath work is, A, it puts your brain into a hyper neuroplastic state. In real time, you're rewiring things.
Yeah.
And it's almost like NLP on steroids, because then as I'm guiding and facilitating, I'm also just planting really positive seeds, reminding you of how beautiful and perfect and whole you are, and stripping away all these beliefs and these lies, these illusions, not being good enough.
Right.
And secondly, when we're stressed, our DNA starts to wind and tighten. when we're in a state of stress, our DNA starts to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And so it's not able to express fully. And this is what causes a lot of disease, a lot of dysfunction. When we breathe in this way, it starts to unwind. And then,
you know what, when you say like the DNA tightening and the expression, like I have to think micro macro too, that if you think about it, like the more stressed we are, the less creatively actualized we are in our big world too. So like I might not have much of a relationship with the DNA in my body because, you know, I just picked out cute clothes and put makeup on. I didn't really think about my DNA. But like when you think about how even stress and tension causes the whole macro of your form to kind of tighten and coil in. And there is no creativity that really flows through that or expresses or opens up. So I just got that visual when you said that.
that's beautiful because there's no flow.
Yeah.
Because there's no flow. There's too much tension.
There's too much holding. It's like the difference between something that's dammed up and something that's just flowing organically. Yeah.
Well, it's also, for example, like when we're in a stressful spots, our pupils dilate, we develop tunnel vision. That's all we see. But we miss everything else. You know,
miss the big picture.
We sure
the
do.
Contextual big picture of what's going on.
And that's both physically and mentally.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like it's hard to then grasp and see how different things combine and like to actually generate.
Or the solutions to my problems. Like when I get myopically like hyper focused on my problem, that never happens to me, Tom. I'm just talking hypothetically. Most of my life, how many days I've been alive, all of those. But then the solutions, the ways around it, the ways to fix it, the ways to move through it, like I can't see that. That's not available. And it's crazy. And this is like the beauty of like having a friend who can see the bigger picture, isn't so tightly focused on that, and can say, well, you know, here's some ideas of like to work around that. Like you relax and kind of pull back a little bit. There's always some sort of a first step toward some solution.
Always.
Yeah, we're never stuck.
But we always miss the forest for the tree because we're too close to it.
Yeah, and especially in that heightened state.
Especially. And so like with really the goal with those somatic breath work journeys is to release all of that stored content. But then I also use that opportunity to really just break free of limitations, like remember and rediscover your connection to yourself and your higher wisdom, your higher self. All of that. Your breath is the bridge to that. And what I love about breathwork practice is it puts you in the driver's seat. You're the one guiding the journey. And that's what I tell everyone. Like, you don't have to go into places you don't want to. You've got one foot on the gas, you've got one foot on the brake, you can slow it down, you can speed it up. I'm there to just really make sure that hold the space, facilitate it. I curate a playlist for every single one. And this is the beauty of breathwork. It's art and science. So you know the science, you know what's required, you know what you need to do to get people into the states they need to get into. But there's a lot of different flexibility and ways around it. You know, because I do have clients who are just so anxious. I can't have them do that practice. It's too overwhelming for this system. But there's ways for me to also guide them in a different way where we're doing really cyclical breath, you know, and we're just getting them into a very deep meditative place. So there's a lot of ways to work with the breath, but you always have the potential and the power, and you also hold the responsibility to do this for yourself, you know. And so it's very empowering, because think about how often we disempower ourselves and we give power away to a medical professional or a politician.
Talk about an ancestral path. Pattern. Yeah, definitely. Can I ask, what have your experiences been at the light doing the breath work? Has it been super interesting in any way?
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and for anyone who doesn't know about the light, it's a beautiful space that you created that uses the energy enhancement system that was developed by Dr. Sandra Michael Rose, and it just generates and creates this beautiful, you know, biophotonic scalar electromagnetic field where it really places you in a state that allows the body even more so to purge through, to release more.
It's like interesting to think of. You guys, the EE system has like 4 towers, and it's emitting this energy that comes, it's calibrated within 1/100th of an inch to the center of the room. It creates a toroidal field. So when you walk in the room, it just looks like a room with these screens in the corners and a bunch of lazy boy chairs, but you feel something.
You feel something the second you step into
The second you definitely feel something. And so you lay in there and you rest, and it's like, because we can't see this high frequency energy with our eyes, and the instruments that even measure it are so very expensive that, like, we can't personally measure it, but like, you can't, your iPhone won't be able to measure it, kind of thing. There isn't an app for this, but like, it's mind-blowing because it looks like nothing, and yet so much can happen. And it's not just a physical experience, it's through all dimensions of being: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic. Like, your whole entire body instrument gets this charge. So yeah.
It sure does. And the experiences there with some people I've had, I mean, the woman this past Sunday, she was just such a beautiful soul. And she, at the end, I mean, it took her a little while to just kind of almost compose herself, but when she was finally able to like say something, she's like, it is so beautiful that you can give something like this to someone. She's like, while I was doing breath work, there was a moment where I just wanted to jump up and like just hug you, you know? And it is beautiful. And I feel like that frequency, that space just fully amplifies the work that you're doing there internally for yourself.
And I think, like, in that space, people have really powerful spiritual experiences. So when she says she wants to get up and hug you, it's like being able to see soul to soul with someone. That's crazy, life changing.
Isn't that the most important thing that we all desperately crave, is to just feel so super seen, so unfiltered, so just like, you see my soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is what I feel like is at the core of every single being. Like, just see me.
Yeah. What it really means to see someone.
Yeah.
And how tangible that is when someone sees you that way versus doesn't see you that, like, it's so tangible.
Yeah. And part of this work too is like, you're developing the courage to be fully authentically yourself, right? Because now you're peeling away, like, for example, for myself, like peeling away all those layers and those fears and those insecurities of being scared that every single human being in my life is going to abandon me, that I ended up saying very dysfunctional business partnerships at times, relationships that were very harmful to me, because let's say I see the other person's pain and, I know what they're going through, and therefore I'm going to allow them to continue to behave this way that's really harmful to me, but because I didn't want to rock the boat.
Oh, the cultural training.
Martyrdom, self-sacrifice.
Codependency
is my vein.
Like, the cultural patterning for that is so deep. Like, I was meditating this morning and I was like, how do I even know me? It's like crazy. Okay, we don't want to get too woo-woo. We're going to lose people. They're going to be flicking out on me. But like, yes, the path back to the self is a really long path, and it's really important to do that work. And I don't know, I think that I newly appreciate the disconnect from myself sometimes. Like, when I come back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so disconnected. Oh my God, like, it's like a new, as much as I know it, it like can happen again in an instant, where just life distracts you. Like, it's important to practice.
As it will. And that's why we have our personal practice to always just come back to center, come back to center, come back to center. So
Tom and I were talking before about like what it feels like to be like new, and to be hearing like these things can help you, but to feel so many barriers to doing them, like, oh, but it's too expensive, oh, but it's too far away, oh, but I don't have time, oh, but it's a little bit weird, oh, but what will they think about me, oh, but it's probably not going to work for me. Like, all the barriers that we have to things, and how exciting it is for us to see people try something new. And it doesn't take long until the experience itself shows you how much of an illusion that barrier was, and then you're on the path and you're getting feedback from what you're experiencing, and things change relatively quickly. So we thought of a few things. You remember what they are?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course you do.
Start with a buddy. It's so important. And again, tying back to the importance of community, but like to have a trusted friend that you can go to a class with, that you participate in a workshop with, someone that can also help hold space for you. Maybe someone who's already done some of those things.
Yeah, or get someone that you know who might be willing to start with you,
Absolutely.
so that you start with a friend. Or if you know someone who you think this would really help, come with them. Like, don't just say you should go do this, like say, let's go together,
Absolutely. Or if you really want to just give yourself an opportunity to explore those things, go online. I mean, we have so many resources now, books, YouTube tutorials.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go anywhere and just start educating yourself, start practicing, start playing with it.
Play with it. Like, I know I'll even watch half a video, so at least I have an idea of what to expect. And but you can start with videos, and my channel has a lot of things for free right there, but you can Google in the thing in the window. All right, what was the third one? Do you remember?
Start beginner classes.
Yeah, beginner classes.
There's introductory things everywhere.
Yeah. Also, sometimes people start with one private, and I give tours of the studio here, and we give tours at the light. So if you just want to stop in and check it out, so you can see where your coat would go, where you do your shoes, where the bathroom is, what the space looks like, you have someone personally answer your questions and talk to you, get a feel for the space and the people. Same at the light. We have a video on the homepage of the light called New Client Walkthrough, and it is me, but it is 10 minutes of just a tour in through the center, so you can see everything and hear all about it and understand how it works and stuff. So like those kinds of resources can make first steps.
Absolutely.
The new year is coming up, so
New Year is coming up. I know, we
Yeah.
were just chatting about that too.
Yeah.
So this is a good time to start planting the seeds of change.
Yeah.
It really is. And we all know, and there's a deeper, higher, wiser part of you that knows how to guide that process.
Yeah. One day at a time, one step at a time.
That's it.
That's it.
And you just have to keep saying yes. That's all you have to do, is just show up.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't say yes and show up, I wouldn't be in Ohio. Trust me, like the way my life kept twisting and turning, the ways I kept pivoting, and all the different things I went through the past few years. But they guided me.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying yes. And
now you're engaged.
I'm engaged. So
employed and working and influencing people.
And doing what I love to do.
Yeah.
And sharing, sharing that gift.
Yeah.
And
Tom's Somatic Breath Work practices at the light are Sundays at 5 p.m.
Sundays at 5 p.m. And if I can say one thing, it's, you truly carry this with you, and again, this isn't woo, this is solid research when I tell you that, your heart emits an electromagnetic field that we can measure 6 feet out at least, with really finely tuned instruments, 14 feet out.
Yeah.
And if I'm grounded, if I'm centered, if I'm in a place of genuine love and compassion, that regulates my heart rhythm patterns, it regulates my brainwave patterns, and it co-regulates the people around me. So by virtue of showing up for yourself, you lift everyone around you. And again, I'm speaking to the parents again. It's like when your child is scared or crying, just hold them
to your heart.
You're co-regulating, because they can't down-regulate it. That's not built in until much later on, but they need healthy co-regulators, and the world needs healthy co-regulators now.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't we know that?
Don't we know that? And I always say, be the one who stays calm.
Yeah.
Be the one that has patience. Whether you're in line somewhere or at the family gathering, kind of be the one that holds the goodness. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tracy.
Awesome. Thanks for following, you guys. I really appreciate it. Tom's details will be in the notes, as well as the website links for everywhere. And I'll even put the books that we mentioned, so that folks can find those.
I might actually give you a few more to add to that list.
Yay!
Just because it's like
a little reading list. Perfect.
A little reading list, because again, I find that having information and context really gives people an opening.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. All right. Thanks for following.